Is that better?
Yeah, this is great.
Okay, super. Thanks for saying that. It's the joy of using two screens. So I've been working in the field of quality engineering and DevOps, I would say, for the last 10 years or so. I've met Barris and other speakers on this conference at various talks, I think in Portugal and in St. Petersburg and in Moscow. And it is a pity we can't travel to all those exotic locations anymore. But it's also a relief, I think, because, you know, I think many of you will know this, business travel is not really that much fun. You fly very far and very long to do a lot of work, and you fly back. And if you're lucky and you have a chance, then you see something of the city. But so it's quite nice to get dressed 10 minutes before a talk like this, and then afterwards to go do other things, and it doesn't involve all that travel. But in any case, so the last few months, I've changed my focus kind of away from software and quality engineering to more of a AI and robotic process automation consulting role. So a little bit about the company that I work for, IQ Business. It is a homegrown business, so it started and is based in South Africa, here in Johannesburg and in Cape Town. We're about 700 people. And we do advisory and implementation work in the technology space, all the way from software development, the analysis, the whole DevOps consulting journey, quite a big team in the data space, which is very relevant to the topic today, and then change management, target operating model, and all the rest. And why I say that is I find that when I deal with clients and we talk about artificial intelligence, that all these things that I've just mentioned is very important. Now, some of you on this call might be very knowledgeable about AI. You might actually have done some work in that field. Some of you may have limited knowledge, but hopefully at the end of this talk, what I'd like to leave with you is the fact that if you don't know it yet, AI is here and it's real. It's already being utilized in most businesses and most likely in the business that you are working for. But there's also a great misconception about what it really is, what it can be used for. So what I normally do when I speak with clients is just to step back a few steps and say, and I'll touch on some of these things as we go through the talk, is what is the business problem you're trying to solve? Because people have come back from a conference, normally it's the CIO or some sort of leader, and he or she will tell us, use AI, implement AI in your business, and it's one of our KPIs. And then we start with some pilots, isolated pilots, and most times it doesn't work for various reasons, but we don't consider things like the business case, people readiness, this kind of technology, and especially when we use the word robotics, brings out so many negative sentiments in people. People fear it. People fear losing their jobs, losing control. So we need to really take our organization and our team members with us on this journey. And then there are things about your data readiness, your skills readiness, all those things. So there's normally a lot of things I share with clients, and I take them through a number of phases before we even start looking at the first RPA or AI implementation. A bit more from an introduction point of view, and thank you for the introduction earlier. I also would like to just very briefly do some advertising. My website is aiforbusiness.net. And what I've been doing over the last few months is interviewing leaders in the field of artificial intelligence globally. And I was amazed how many of these very senior people, it's like data scientists at Google, head of artificial intelligence at Samsung, professors at Yale and Stanford and Oxford, how keen they are to talk about this topic. So, and what I try and do through these talks that I record is to see AI through different lenses. It's often interesting to see how the academics see it. It's interesting to see how people in industry, in business see it. And then of great interest to me is the application of AI in our lives and into our futures. So I think my interest is not the technology itself, even though it is very, very interesting. It is really how it is changing our world. I have a son, he's 6 years old. And often when I think about his future and when I see where AI is going, I'm filled with concern, because like all technological revolutions in the past, more so this one, it can either really serve us and benefit humanity, or it can destroy us. And there is a very real chance in the next 50 or 100 years that this technology will destroy the human race. But I'm not here today to do any scaremongering. I just think we need to be aware of it. We need to think of practical applications in healthcare, for instance, in ethics, in education, in social justice. There's so many good things that we can do with this technology. All right, so let me get going. A little bit about the talk today. So I think I might be talking a lot more about AI than testing or quality engineering, but I think the two fields are really converging. So I want to talk about how we view AI. What is the kind of the attitude we have, the feeling we have when we talk about this topic. Some misconceptions, and there are many, many misconceptions about this. You know, if you ask 10 people what is AI, you'll most likely get 10 different opinions. I want to talk about AI in a business context. What is important to take into account. I also want to talk about some of the kinds of businesses that utilizing AI, and every one of you on this call will most likely identify with some of those businesses. And then I also want to touch on smart automation, robotic process automation, intelligent automation, hyper automation, because that's very relevant to this field. I want to talk a little bit about how testing is viewed, and I'm sure many of you have been in a testing role for many years will have experienced it. Sometimes I think testers are being looked down on. I often speak about testers as the stepchildren of the SDLC, and there are reasons for that, and there are things we can do about that. And then I want to talk about the evolution of testing. Kind of a graph all the way through from manual testing through to testing artificial intelligence systems and using AI. And again, on that graph somewhere, you'll most likely find yourself in your career at the moment, and also the business that you're working for, and to look at what will the next steps be in the evolution of your career, and hopefully to make you think about things like upskilling, attending some courses, and making sure that you are relevant into this ever and quick changing future. Talking about quality engineering future skills. If we are going to use AI to test AI systems, our skill sets need to change rapidly. And then lastly, I don't know if you can see it, I just want to move this on my screen, is to talk a little bit, and it's a huge topic, but I'll do it toward the end and I'll just touch on it, is the relevance of AI in testing, and to think about how we can utilize this technology maybe in our first pilot, what kind of vendors we can maybe potentially partner with, and how this technology can really help us as quality engineers in our jobs. So here's the first question, is how do you view artificial intelligence, or for that matter, any kind of technology? And there's so many names we can throw around. We can talk about machine learning and deep learning and robotics and all that. So most people, when you talk about this topic, they have a very negative view. And the reason is, it's mostly to blame on Hollywood. So whenever we see movies, we see faces like this, Terminator and the rest. We've seen movies and read books about the future where the robots just take over, they kill all of us, they take all our jobs, they use us for body parts and who knows what. So I think most people have a largely negative view about this technology. Some of you might have a negative view as well. And there are relevant reasons for it. But I think the more you read, the more you educate yourself, the more your view will change. Because I think the correct view is what I call cobotics, or that's where this kind of technology can actually help us do a better job, help us to do less work when it comes to the repetitive kind of reporting and those kind of things, and to really start using our skills when it comes to caring for people, sympathy, thinking, and intuition, and all those kind of things. So think of the term cobotics. We don't really have a choice. This tsunami has hit us. It's going to keep on influencing us. So you cannot move away from AI and how it's going to impact your world, the future of your children, but also your current job. It will be disrupted by this technology. So fear it or learn about it and become an expert in it as far as you can. So just keep that in mind. It's the way you view this kind of technology and the way you view your own future, your own career when it comes to this technology will most likely set the scene for the career track that you're going to go. Don't hide from it. Don't run away from it. Learn as much as you can. It's not as difficult as many people think. I mean, some of the basics of technology will stay the same. And yes, there's a lot more terms that's being thrown around, new things we need to learn. Half the time when some of these AI people speak, I have no idea what they're speaking about. Then when I think about it, I realized I've actually made a lot of fairly simple ideas sound very, very complex. So when we go through this talk, keep this in mind. Change your thinking about it, and your thinking and your fears will be changed by information. Learn as much as you can. Let's talk about some of the misconceptions. And as I said earlier, there are so many. A lot of these terms are used almost in the same sentence. And sorry if this is so fundamental and so easy, maybe for some of you it's news. One of the greatest misconceptions is that robotic process automation, or RPA, and artificial intelligence is the same thing. So people will talk about in business, we need robotics in our company. And then it's always good to stop them and ask them what they mean. Never just take it on face value. Is when you say robotics, Mr. Customer, what do you mean with that? So some people might think of actual physical robots like in an assembly plant in a factory. Some people might have heard at a conference that the bots, we can just use bots everywhere in the business. We can replace all our people or have a bot per person. And you hear all these things. That if you attend RPA and AI kind of conferences, you hear a lot of the same kind of jargon. And sometimes it's good to just step back and ask yourself and ask your peers and your clients, what do they mean? Robotic process automation is not AI, and I will talk about that a little bit more during this talk. Maybe the greatest misconception is that it's some sort of a silver bullet, that it will just magically fix business process problems, quality problems, target operating model, ways of working. So I always say, whatever you have, technology like this will exponentially amplify it. So if what you have is a broken system, broken processes, quality processes that's not working and so forth, this technology will just amplify it. And imagine what a mess that can be. That's why you have to step back and make sure you are ready for this technology, data, people, and those things that I've mentioned. The other misconception, maybe alluding to the previous slide, is that it's a very negative thing. It's almost from the devil, if you would, or it's a conspiracy by China or some dark forces or whatever. There's so many different ways to see it, but it is essentially coding. And I'm sure you know that. In some of my other talks, what I do is I show a picture of an evil robot like I've just shown you. I'll show a picture of a friendly robot, and I'll show a picture of lines of code. And I'll ask people in the audience, which picture most accurately represents artificial intelligence? And more often than not, most of the people will say the evil robot. Some people will say the friendly robot. But I've only at one conference before where somebody put up their hand and said the coding is artificial intelligence. And that's exactly it. We anthropomorphize it. So that's a Greek word that basically means, if you think of the history of mankind, things that we don't understand, we try and shape it to look like us. Think of the ancient gods, the ancient statues that they've dug up in countries like Turkey and somewhere else in the Middle and Near East. They always look like a human, little eyes, ears, feet, sometimes a big belly if it's a fertility god. So we as a species try and make things look like us when we don't understand it. Now we're doing the very same with artificial intelligence at the moment. It's not a bot. It's not a thing with eyes and ears. Yes, we make it look nice. Maybe it's easier to identify it. If you think of a customer service bot, if you walk into a store and there's a little bot that asks you what you want and so forth, maybe there's some natural language processing. It can understand what you say. It can point you to the right direction, right counter or department and so forth. But essentially, that's just a machine with coding in the background. So, and if you Google artificial intelligence and robotics, most of the pictures you will see will look like robots, eyes and ears and noses and stuff like that. Just keep that in mind as well. There's so many misconceptions, and the only way for you to make sure that you know what you're talking about and to understand what clients are talking about is to educate yourself, read up about this technology, understand the subtle differences between machine learning and deep learning and RPA and all the other terms that we hear, because there's a very good chance, as I said, when your teammates, your peers, your clients ask and talk about this technology, that it's not necessarily, as they say, comparing apples with apples. You have to ask people, when they talk about AI, what do they mean? And you'll be surprised at the misconceptions that you can find out there. Just a brief view of some of the companies using artificial intelligence. And again, somewhere on the scale you will find yourself. You get what we call AI first companies, like an Uber. Uber was started as an artificial intelligence company, and there are many others like that. But imagine you work for a company like this, where from the very start, there was a strategy, the data strategy was in place, the skills were in place. You started off as an AI business. That must be amazing, but I can bet you almost no one in this meeting who works for a company like that. And if you do, you're very privileged. Next, we get what we call the trailblazers, and those are the big boys, the Apples and the Alibabas and the IBMs and the Microsofts. They might not have started as AI businesses, but they are obviously on the forefront of what artificial intelligence is doing, and they are doing some amazing, amazing work. Then you have the startups. There's about 8,000 AI startups in the world. There's quite a few exciting ones in South Africa, especially in Cape Town. But these are companies that are doing amazing work. They get a lot of funding. Some of them are doing military work, which is a bit of a scary topic if you think of the weaponization of artificial intelligence, you know, autonomous drones, facial recognition. It's no longer a person pulling the trigger. Hopefully, and think of quality software again, hopefully the facial recognition is correct and it kills the right person, you know. Imagine there's a problem. Imagine there wasn't proper testing in that. But in any case, so some of you might be working for the Trailblazers, the Google's, Facebook. Some of you might be working for the startups. But I bet you most of us in this call are working for what I would call a traditional business. It might be a bank or a telco or a mining company or who knows what. But essentially, you did not start as an AI company. You most likely are 50 or 100 years old, very federated. Some of the systems are not talking to each other, on a big push to try and put all your things on one platform. Customer experience is an important topic. But the point I'm trying to make is most companies that we work for on this call, in this meeting, are companies that are starting out on this journey. Some have tried it and failed, and there are reasons for it, which I'll allude to. Some are thinking they don't need it, and they will essentially become irrelevant. And some are doing it in some small part. And then there are some traditional businesses, especially in the insurance space, for instance, that are doing amazing things with artificial intelligence. So think about this picture. Where do you fit? Where currently is your career? And also where you are at the moment will potentially limit your career growth. Because if the organization you are working for, or the clients you are working with, is not embracing this technology correctly, it will be a mess. And it will impact your career growth. It'll impact your learning trajectory. So perhaps, if that's the case, you need to look to work for another organization. And I'll touch on that again a little later on when I look at the evolution of testing. The business value of artificial intelligence. And again, guys, just think of it from a business point of view. Take off the technicality, the technical hat. What is the business case? The focus of AI is solving business problems. It's really that simple, or even though it is not simple. But no matter what exciting things we do, POCs and pilots and whatever, if it doesn't solve a business problem, or for that matter, answer a business opportunity, then why are we using this technology? All right. Two more statements that I want to read through, and I hate reading slides, but I think this is worth it. An AI journey has an organizational-wide impact, which will result in an organizational shift and should not be done in isolated business areas. And I think if most organizations have read this, they wouldn't have been in the AI mess that they are in at the moment. Let's never underestimate the massive change this technology brings into our organizations. As I said earlier, how people view it, how people fear it, it's totally changing the way we're working. And if we don't lead our people through the changes to positively apply this kind of technology and to enthusiastically embrace it, we will have a mess. We will have resistance. We will have problems. But it's a massive shift. So whether your whole organization is looking for it or just in your software development or testing space, it is a very big mindset shift, and you should never underestimate it. And two things that we can use from a business point of view when it comes to this technology. It optimizes decision-making, resulting in faster responses to targeted questions. And that's where we talk about modeling and machine learning and pattern recognition. And I'll talk about that now. And obviously processing high volumes of data, seeing patterns that we may not have been looking for. One of my clients is a telco provider, a mobile phone provider here in Johannesburg. They have, I think, about 22 million customers. So think of the data that these kind of companies have on its consumers, on its clients, and the positive things we can do with it. I recently did a talk where I spoke about this. I said in August, my 2-year mobile phone contract came up for renewal. And as many of you know, in that initial year or two, you essentially pay a premium on your mobile phone contract because they are financing the mobile phone handset. That's why we get it for free, but it's not really free. Essentially, you're paying every month a premium for that handset. But now at the end of the contract period, in my case 2 years, you essentially should not be paying for the handset anymore. They should lower your costs. And not just that, they should contact you and say, Mr. or Mrs. Client, the contract's coming to an end. Based on how you're using your data, based on geographically where you're traveling, based on the applications you're using and so forth, here are 3 or 4 packages to upgrade to that will be of great interest. Excuse me, and what happened in my case, which is often the case, no one phoned me. In fact, I phoned them 3 times, and 3 times the phone call dropped. How sad is that? You phone your mobile phone provider and they can't answer the call because of the signal quality. I didn't get an email, even though I've sent an email. So they have a big chance of losing me. I might go look for an alternative mobile phone provider. So the point here is, and this is just a customer experience example, there are many other examples from an operational cost, back office cost point of view, but to look for patterns that humans can't see, and also to look for patterns that we might not have asked it to look for, and then to bring that up so that we can make business decisions on it. And that is the business value of artificial intelligence. I want to talk briefly about robotic process automation, which you see here in the middle. Excuse me, but I want to talk about intelligent automation. So again, I don't know which part of the screen you can see. Let me just minimize this. And this is relevant to what we're doing from a quality engineering point of view. A lot of organizations are still here in the first 2 blocks. They're trying to optimize their processes and they're trying to automate it some way or another. Robotic process automation is a kind of key topic at the moment. Most of my clients are talking about that. And again, a lot of them, when I start speaking about it, do not really understand what it is. They think either it'll save them great costs because they can essentially get rid of all their people, which is not the case. Or they think the RPA will itself mature and sort out the process problems. And then they start some sort of a RPA pilot. And it's a mess because the processes are not defined, they're not mature, the bots are not being maintained. But the clients I'm dealing with at the moment, I'm already telling them, RPA is a good start, but think of the future, which is here already. And next, we're going to look at intelligent automation and in time, hyper automation. So I just want to unpack this a little bit. And one of the best ways for me to understand this is that RPA is doing technology. It's like a slave, if you would. It does what we tell it to do. So, you know, you can do some process mining. You can obviously program the bot to run through a certain process, but it does what you tell it to do. It doesn't think, it doesn't learn, and that's one of the big differences between RPA and artificial intelligence. Also, this is mostly used for back office automation, operational automation. And we're looking at high repetitive, high frequency kind of tasks, which is often your administrative kind of tasks, potentially call center kind of work and things like that. And then at the bottom there you see narrow artificial intelligence. So just to distinguish between the types of AI that people normally speak about. Currently we have what they call narrow artificial intelligence, which means the machines are not that much smarter than we are. But you know, when you look at most people, how smart people are is quite a question. But essentially, I mean, it can learn, there's machine learning, it can adapt itself, it can grow. But it's not yet much smarter than people. Yes, it can beat us at Go and it can beat us at chess, but there's no philosophical side to it, softer side to it, ethics side to it, and so forth. And then when we move on to the future, and I'll get back to the narrow artificial intelligence now. So look at what I'm showing here. Going from doing technology to learning technology, going from back office to front office automation. And now we're looking at unpredictable tasks. So on the one hand, we can say these are the tasks we would like to automate. But if you use machine learning and the like correctly, it can actually automate tasks itself, and that's intelligent automation. And that's where we're going to get to in time, hyper automation. Essentially what you're seeing here is the worlds of artificial intelligence and machine learning merging with robotic process automation, going from the back office to the front office, automating tasks we did not ask it to do because it's learning, it's seeing patterns and the like. And now I think from a customer experience point of view, things like computer vision, deep learning, natural language processing, how this kind of technology can really help us better service our customers. Now, looking at this picture for a moment, you are a DevOps or a quality engineer, or automation tester, or whatever. Think of how your role might be applied in this journey. And again, as I said, a lot of organizations are still in the beginning phase. Some have dabbled in RPA, some are doing RPA quite successfully. very few started doing intelligent automation. But if you need to write a strategy or a test plan, if you need to recruit a team for an intelligent automation initiative, how would that look? Because you need a totally different approach. You need a totally different set of skills in your team. And so when you think about your career and the path you're going to go from a training point of view and an experience point of view, keep this kind of picture in mind. All right, how do they see testers? Like I said, many of you who have been in testing will know all about this. As I said, the stepchildren of the SDLC. My experience is that if you look at the rest of the software development lifecycle, all the other teams or the DevOps squads or whatever, my experience is that people look down on testers. The view in the past has almost been that if you couldn't make it as a developer, so now you're going to become a tester and you become a manual tester. And testing was often blamed for delays and things like that, and sometimes that was correct. Often it was not, because as you guys know, in a traditional development life cycle, we're all the way at the end, there's no budget left, there's no time left, and everything is dumped on the testing team. So there's a blame to be made to our peers, the developers, the architects, and so forth. But I also think a lot of us are to be blamed ourselves. I've worked with many testers over the years who really don't focus on upskilling themselves, who don't read, who don't go for training, who don't learn to work closer with the other people in the squad to understand the world of a software architect and a software developer and a business analyst, to really understand the world of the business that we're trying to serve. So I think there's a kind of a two-way street here. I think it's changing because if we do this correctly, if we really are quality engineers in a DevOps squad or something like that, if we really drive quality and our peers and our teammates can see the benefit of having us with our skills and our tool sets and our knowledge, then we win them over. But think of this, maybe you yourself have experienced this, where people look down on you. Ask yourself why that is. It's not right that they do so, but maybe there's also some fault on our own side. So again, and I think this is what, if there's one thing I can land with this talk, and that's my last slide as well, it's to keep on learning. It's in your hands. Don't wait for your company to send you for training. Don't wait for things to happen. There's so much online at the moment. There's so much free training. There's so many books. You really have to educate yourself. So just a bit on how they see testing. So a bit about the evolution of quality. So essentially what you see at the bottom, the blocks is kind of a timeline, an evolutionary timeline. And what that vertical arrow shows is the rate of change or the technical complexity. So let me talk you through this. So, and by the way, this was a Tricentis presentation that I saw and adapted. I actually should have put it here on the slide. So classical testing or very manual testing that takes years and months. Now this happened so long ago. I think when I started dabbling in testing about 10, 11 years ago, a lot of projects were still there. But it's surprising when I speak to some of my clients, how many of them are still working in so-called classical testing. Very manual, very slow, all the way to at the end. The organization itself and how it develops software hasn't changed. So some of you on this in this meeting might find yourself there. And again, as I go through this, just try and see where you are so that we can talk about how to get you to the next step. And then Agile was such a buzzword a few years ago. You know, again, a lot of people didn't understand what it was, and again, thought it was a silver bullet and no more documentation needed and all that. But when we got it right, it definitely did speed up our velocity when it came to working together as a team, having better quality much earlier on. The role of the QA engineer was understood a bit better. And then we got to where potentially many of you are at the moment is the role of continuous testing. That's now still faster weeks and days, and the so-called DevOps word. That's another one of those words. If you ask 10 people, you get 10 different opinions. And then you get DevSecOps and I don't know what ops, and I've recently read of ML ops and who knows what. But now it's a whole different world that we live in from a continuous testing point of view. And then the next step, which is essentially what I'm talking about today, is intelligent testing, where we now can test in days, if not in minutes. And then we look at terms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotic process automation, quantum computing, the internet or the industry of things, predictive analytics, and the like. The challenge here is how do we ensure that there's quality? So either how do we use this kind of technology to perform testing, or how do we test these kind of systems? So that's the question then. Where do you fit on this scale? I can bet you most of you are in those first two blocks. Not all of you. And it's not necessarily your fault. It's the organizations we're working with and the way they're working that is forcing us to still work in a very manual way, or starting to look at agile. I still have clients, big banks, very successful big organizations who still not understanding agile. They want to talk about safe, but the fundamentals of agile is not understood. I have another client, for instance, who on one day changed all their project managers' titles to Scrum Masters, just like that. And then you can imagine now your traditional project management professional and the way they're working, their mindsets, especially if they've been doing it for many years. Now they need to be a Scrum Master. And the misconceptions that were involved, it was an absolute mess. So think of where you are in this journey. If you're already working in a fairly mature DevOps kind of world, continuous integration, continuous testing, and so forth, you are very privileged. If you are not there, you're on your way there. So you have to think about what it's going to take to understand the lingo, the ways of working, the technical knowledge you need to attain to get there. And then few of you, if any, potentially are currently working in the red block. And I would be interested to hear from you when we do the Q&As a little bit later on. So look at this, think where you are. There's a reason why you may be stuck in this red block, because it's not necessarily your fault. I mean, you can do all the training in the world. If your organization doesn't give you the opportunity to practice that training, to really do DevOps kind of work, it's going to be theoretical knowledge. I quickly want to check on time, if you don't mind. I reckon there's about 5 or 10 minutes left.
Yeah, like we will have a poll question about artificial intelligence and testing, but it will only take a few minutes. So if you want to continue, a little while.
Okay, cool. No, okay, that's good. I don't have too much to go, but I think a conversation and questions and stuff will be quite interesting.
Okay, yeah, sure, great.
Okay.
Should we also ask the poll question, and because I want to know your thoughts about this question and about the answers.
Okay. Do you want to ask it toward the end?
Sure, yeah. You will tell me.
Okay, good. Okay, cool. Not long to go. You know how strange it is, and I'm sure a lot of you who have been doing these kind of talks and some of the speakers in this conference, it is so weird not to see anyone you're speaking to. Because I normally thrive off the, call it the vibe of the audience. You can see in people's faces whether they're getting it or not, agreeing or not. Now you're just speaking to your screen. So hopefully it's going okay. But in any case, let me continue. Not too long to go anymore. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. From, and see now, this is the thing with Zoom. Oh, there we go. I can't see much on my screen. From testing to quality engineering, I've already alluded to this. And we can debate the philosophical meaning behind this. Again, if you think of that graph I just showed, are you just doing testing? Is it just at the end? Is it just functional and manual? Or have you been growing or thinking about growing your career into an engineering role, a quality engineering role? And this is supposed to happen in a DevOps kind of a squad or in a CI/CD pipeline kind of a world. It's not always happening. But so what does a quality engineer do rather than a tester? My simple view is, as testers, we kind of do what we're being told. We test and then we're done. Don't necessarily always think of the larger context of the program you're working on or the application. Don't always think about the real business application. But quality engineering for me is so much more than testing, because it should start from a business objective point of view, an architectural point of view, through development. So I've seen this, and maybe some of you have seen this too, where the role in a mature organization is that the QA department is becoming more of an advisory role. There's still a technical implementation part of it, but we do need champions in our teams that can actually help the whole organization understand what quality means. So quality is not just that functionally it works, as many of you know. It's essentially what our clients think of the work we've been doing. So that kind of continuous feedback loop, where the client is consumers or it's our own business users, but it's advising on what quality means, and then showing the technical expertise yourself or some of your team members to guide your organization through that journey. So can you see how important the role of a tester has become if we talk about quality engineering? Now put artificial intelligence on that and the great damage it can do from a medical point of view, from a monetary point of view, from a military point of view. we certainly want our software to work. So all of us are in a very exciting job, even if you feel a bit stuck today, and even if you do still a lot of manual testing and I don't want to upskill you and all that. And that brings me back to the don't fear artificial intelligence part of my talk. We are, I think of, and it's a biased opinion, but if you think of all the role players in a typical software development project, the ones that need to change the most and the ones that will have the most exciting role into the future are testers. If we embrace this, if we learn, if we understand the business language, not just the technical side of it, if we learn an engineering mindset, and if we learn about this kind of technology. Just get to the next one. Here are some terms that if you read about this technology and testing or quality engineering that you will see. Smart testing, so it's obviously using artificial intelligence, machine learning, pattern recognition in your craft of testing. But some, and this is from the World Quality Report, you can also see this in some of the Gartner and Forrester reports, when they think about the future skills of testers, and it's not far in the future, it's kind of now already, what are people and organizations looking for? So let's just step back. If you want that quality engineering role, that overarching advisory role, technical expertise role, in a world of AI and machine learning, they're going to look for, on your CV, statistical skills. I personally know no tester with very good statistical skills. Mathematical skills, also don't know many, including myself. I've got Excel. But then you start seeing the jobs being advertised like an AI QA strategist. Are you in a position to apply for a job like that? Most likely not. So what can you do to get to that point? Or an AI test expert. And somewhere or another, you need to start getting that experience to perform testing utilizing AI and machine learning, or to work in a project where AI needs to be tested. So just think of this one slide, and I'm sure the slides will be available in the next few days. Your statistical mathematical skills, can you be a strategist from a QA point of view in an big AI implementation? And can you see yourself as an expert? Just a few examples of, I think, where AI is used in quality engineering. I worked for a bank before my current role, and we had a few interactions with some of the big global consulting firms where we had successful POCs in this field. But think of it, again, through an artificial intelligence lens. I remember we had one project program where we had 100,000 test cases. And we ran this machine learning model with the help of the vendor through all the test cases. And we picked up a lot of duplicates, a lot of redundant test cases. But so what the AI and the machine learning is doing is pattern recognition. And we ended up, so think of this now, so 100,000 test cases. We ended up with only needing 10,000 test cases. That's a 90% drop. But not only that, because what does that do? Your effort and goes down, your speed goes up, and all those things. But our coverage went up 145%. So think this, 90% less test cases needed with 145% more coverage. That is, if you know, that hopefully means your test data is correct, all your other data is correct. I mean, the data is the petrol that this engine called AI is working on. But you can optimize your test cases, the quality of your test cases, and the deployment of your test cases, and the creation of the test cases, which is another thing AI can start doing for us, is to actually create these test cases. We oversee it, but the creation of the test cases is done by the machine. That might sound like crazy, but I think it's possible. And then analyzing the defects, because there are patterns in the defects. And again, not to see the defects just in the silo of the project you're working on. We need to look at it from an organizational point of view, because there are potentially elements in another area in the business that's impacting the defects on your program. So what are those patterns? And then we can start seeing that the problem could lie with a specific software development vendor, for instance, a specific DevOps squad, a specific part of the testing team or whatever, or the architecture. But to identify, it almost comes back to root cause analysis, but to use the machine learning modules to identify where these problems originate so we can fix it in source. And then automation. A lot of you in this call are most likely familiar and practicing test automation. But I'm here talking about more process automation, a process automation in the testing world. So remember the earlier slide, robotic process automation, intelligent automation, hyper automation. So automation here for me is not just how we automate the way we test, which AI definitely can do, but it also to automate the way we are working. I think that process is more often the problem, more so than a technical problem. So maybe give you an example. You're part of a testing team in a bank. So you're waiting for the programs to notify you that we need testers. And then you either give them testers as almost like a resource provisioning engagement, or you actually take in the piece of work as a deliverable. But how often have we not, and this was my experience when I worked at the bank, how often did we not employ people, get people off other projects, get ready for this trigger to be pulled, and then that program or project is delayed. Now suddenly we're sitting with a lot of people on the bench. Who do we build them to? Who's carrying the bench cost? Things like if you can use AI machine learning in your testing tools. Again, that job, we had about 40 different testing tools. After analyzing it and using artificial intelligence to look at the validity and the accuracy of, and the use of these tools, we brought it down from 40 to 8. So you can think the cost saving there. So I don't want to delve on this too much, but if you look at what some of the big consulting firms and others are doing in this field, there are so many practical applications of AI in this world. The trick then, and this is what I want to end off before we take some questions and answers, is where do we start? So you can start by upskilling, reading, and so forth. But as an organization, the way, whether it's a center of excellence or whatever you work in, our thinking and our use of this technology must change as well. And sometimes we as individuals cannot really influence it as much as we want to. So it might be that you work in an organization where it will never change or not change quickly enough. Then you're going to have to make a career decision to go somewhere where your skills can be used. But first, you need those skills. And then my very last slide, guys, keep on learning. The power is in your hands. Understand what all the lingo means. Understand what this technology means. Understand how you can apply it in your craft. There really is no more excuses. We don't have to go for training. We don't need a budget for training always. It's all online. Before it sounds like I'm preaching to you, I hope it was valuable. That's essentially the end of my talk. So happy for the poll, perhaps, or some questions and answers.
Hi. Sure. Let's do the poll, and maybe during that time also some questions will come. Let's see the poll. Okay. Which of the following do you find more important? Testing artificial intelligence or using artificial intelligence in software tests? Let's see what attendees are thinking about it, and also then I want to learn your perspective about it. I'm also submitting my answer. By the way, how is Corona going in South Africa? I want to learn.
Look, I think to a large extent, the same as in the rest of the world. The one thing that was different is that we had a very hard lockdown in the beginning in March already. More harder than most parts of the world, which had a massive impact on our economy, but it did stop the spread quite significantly. We are now on the so-called level 1, which we still wear masks, but we can go to restaurants and all that. But the worry is the second and third waves, which I think is inevitable across the world if you see what's happening in Europe at the moment. So yeah, so we are working from home, and that's a new interesting way of working, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm glad that with the lockdown you had this stop the spread. Maybe it wouldn't come the second wave. I hope. Let's see the results. So, okay. Oh, okay. It's half an hour. What do you think about this result? Yeah.
Look, I expected it. I do think I was thinking that more people would say they want to use AI, because I think that's almost the evolution. Because to test an AI system, we need to use AI to test it with. So to a large extent, not in all cases, but so I think learning to use AI to test whatever is the first step to essentially testing AI. So it's I think it's encouraging that that's the result.
And do you think this COVID situation will help or increase artificial intelligence? Because augmented reality, virtual reality, they increase more. Do you think it will also affect artificial intelligence?
It absolutely will. I think, look, organizations globally have been forced to digitize. A lot of companies have been dragging their feet or thinking we're going to do it next year. There was an article, I think it was a McKinsey report this week, that they reckon companies did more digitization in this 5-6 months than they did in the last 10 years, which means the use of AI, machine learning and the like will rapidly increase as well. So it's forcing it to happen. And that's why we so much more urgently need to force ourselves to learn how to use this technology.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm checking if there are any questions, but
I have a question. I have a question, please.
Yeah. Hi, Baris.
Hi, Johan. So
Hi.
I have a tricky question to you.
Okay.
I have seen till now, I have seen many people coming into testing from different disciplines. From one strange one was a lady. She was like she completed her undergrad degree on like a painting kind of thing, artistry kind of thing. She was a painter, you know. Then she becomes a tester. And your story is, I think, more strange for me. If it is not so special, we want to hear your background and then how you become a person like this and telling people about artificial intelligence and robotic process automation. If it is not secret for you.
No, no, it's not. Look, so just to comment on the first point, I've seen this. Again, because testing is seen as it's so easy and anyone can do it, and you don't have to be just so smart that you can develop. You can essentially put anyone in testing. That's been the traditional view. And it's often somebody's niece or nephew or family member that needs a job, and the senior person in the bank says, no, he or she needs to test. I've seen that a lot. And unfortunately, it happens, and it still happens. And it doesn't mean those people won't be successful. Maybe some of them, if they have the right technical way of thinking, the right kind of talent, can become great quality engineers. But I think it's a result of how testing is still seen as is really needed, and it's so easy. So that has happened, and it's unfortunate. So I studied undergraduate focusing on philosophy, psychology, and theology. So even though I had a bursary to go study computer engineering, I said, no, I want to do that. And still, I love philosophy and those things still more than AI even. You know, although the philosophy of AI, the way we see our world and ethics and the like is really converging. So I find that this passion for AI and passion for philosophy can really get together. I think I'm just hungry for learning, to answer your question, Boris. I try and read a book a week if I get time, or an audiobook. I attend as many conferences as I can, and I network with as many people on LinkedIn as I can. And I think if you're hungry to learn, you can learn anything, you know. And what is daunting to me is this technology is changing so quickly that I almost fear not keeping up with it. So I think that's the thing. It's just get off your ass and start reading some books. That's my advice to people. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you know, you are a really big, great example for people that have a desire to come into the software testing field without any, you know, technical background, but have a technical way of thinking, as you've said. I think this is the most important thing. So commitment matters, qualification doesn't. Was one of my slides for yesterday. So you are one big proof for that. And also a very popular person based on the AI and the testing area. So everyone is looking for you in the conferences. So it was a very big pleasure for us to have you here on our virtual stage. Hopefully we will have you on our physical stage as well in near future.
It was it was a great honor, Baris. Thank you. I'm going to drop in and out of the conference today during other calls, but I look forward to hear some of the speakers and hopefully to see the recordings when they're out in a few days. But again, thank you so very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my friend. So please have a wonderful day, and we will keep in touch. And thanks for your thoughts and sharing.